Hi everyone, my name is Kara Seffel and I'm a GBS nutrition intern with the Health and Wellness team. And today we'll talk about how to feed a healthy family with a focus on pressure feeding. So for today's agenda, we'll cover hunger and fullness cues, pressure feeding, food phrasing, picky eating, and building trust. And then we'll go over a few of the week's resources. So we're all born with the ability to sense when our body is hungry and when it is full. But as we get older and ignore these signals, they can become harder to recognize, setting us up for either under or more often than not, overfeeding. So infants have a keen sense of their innate hunger and fullness signals, and expressing these signals is crucial before verbal communication skills develop. So the caregiver should learn to recognize these feeding cues to honor the child's innate hunger signals. So you can see some examples here of a brand new infant, 0 to 6 months old. When they're hungry, you might see some rooting or sucking movements. They might open and close their mouth, put their hands to their mouth, clench their hands, or turn their heads towards the breast or the bottle, depending on which type of feeding they're being provided. When they are full, you'll see them relax, start to fall asleep. They might slow or pause in their feeding, close their mouth, or turn away from the breast or the bottle. And you can see that these hunger and fullness signals change a little bit over 6 to 12 months, and then 12 to 23 months. And as you approach that older age, closer to 2, that infant is becoming a toddler and more able to verbally communicate hunger and fullness signals. So really about 18 months or so, most toddlers can verbally communicate their hunger and fullness to the caregiver. So ideally, we want to stay towards the middle of this hunger and fullness scale. And by talking to your toddler or your child about how they're feeling, you can help them recognize when they're full. So for example, on the far left, a number 1 will be ravenous, will eat anything. Maybe they're like, I'm so hungry, I can eat an elephant. They may feel dizzy or nauseous. That's the extreme, right? On the other end of the extreme, we have a 10, and they might say they're very uncomfortable. They feel so full, it's hard to breathe. Sitting feels difficult. So we really don't want them to be on either end of this extreme, because that can lead to not feeling very good, under or overeating. And in general, they're just not going to be a pleasant human to be around. So we really want to aim for the middle of this scale and talking to them about if they are hungry enough to eat a little bit, if they can wait a little bit longer, if they feel satisfied with the amount they've eaten, they're not hungry anymore, but they're not really full either. So starting to talk about these things with the child can help them understand their own hunger and fullness signals that their body is sending them. So when we ignore the child's physical or verbal hunger signals, we can dull that connection of their feelings of hunger and fullness to the point where they aren't sure anymore how they're feeling. And when these signals are no longer recognized, external influences on appetite can more easily sway eating habits. So some of these external influences are those high reward foods, which are often a combination of sugary, salty, and high fat foods that send those reward mechanisms in the brain. Sibling snack foods, larger than needed portion sizes. These are all examples of external influences that can negatively change a feeding behavior of the child. So the way that a caregiver feeds their child can also affect hunger and fullness signaling as well, especially when we think about pressure feeding. So there are a few different forms of pressure feeding. I'm just highlighting 3 of these, but caregivers often entice their children to eat veggies or behave well with the promise of a sweet treat for good behavior. And using food as a reward places these sweet foods up on a pedestal by reinforcing that relationship between sweet treats and good behavior. So behaviors like food as a reward can alter the child's taste by increasing preference for the sweet intensities, and less sweet foods lose value. So children's expectations are to deserve sweets as a reward is a learned behavior. As well, pressure feeding a child can contribute to lifelong antagonistic relationships with food. So we're requiring the child to clean your plate, by eating foods when they're no longer hungry or consistently serving larger portion sizes than are realistic or necessary for the child can disrupt those internal hunger and fullness cues. So toddlers learn to associate hunger cues with the amount of food on the plate. Therefore, pressure feeding actually teaches the child to eat past their own level of fullness. Pressure feeding creates a negative emotional context surrounding mealtime, which may continue into adulthood in the form of disordered eating or even full-blown eating disorders. So the third type, pressure feeding, can also be more subtle in how a caregiver talks about food and talks about the mealtime with the child. So we'll look more closely at this one. So the way the caregiver talks about food in the mealtime can affect the relationship they develop with food, the child that is, and it can either positively or negatively follow them into adulthood, those lifelong habits. So this food phrasing table, it's provided in our resources, but the left-hand column states the goal of the food phrase, followed by a negative food phrase in the red column and a positive food phrase in the green column. So if the goal is to teach or reward through activities together rather than through food, a negative phrase would be, if you behave well, we'll have ice cream. A positive phrase would rather be, behave well so we can play your favorite game later today. Another example is to create healthy boundaries. So the caregiver can present options in the meal and the child can choose what to eat. So that's the goal, right? A negative phrase would be, eat all your vegetables or no dessert. Whereas the positive phrasing would be, these are your options for dinner, and just leave it at that. So if the goal is to increase exposure to new foods without teaching eating for emotional reasons, the negative phrase would be, make mommy proud and eat your broccoli. But rather the positive phrase would be, you can eat it when you're ready. So we're not forcing them to eat something they're not ready to try. So also strategic exposure makes sweet treats no big deal. So this is a strategy to avoid using that food as a reward. So the negative would be, you're not allowed to have sweets, or the positive would be, here's your lunch. And in there, you might have put a small treat on their plate or in their lunchbox so that it's just a part of every day. It's not up on this pedestal. So if the goal is to teach kids to eat the amount of food that their body needs by helping them recognize their fullness, instead of saying, clean your plate, you can ask, is your tummy full? And help the child understand what they're feeling in their own body. And this last one can be a little more subtle, something that we don't always think about, but we want to build that trust around food. So try to keep language around trying new foods, especially with toddlers, neutral, which can help picky eaters stay open-minded about food. So a negative phrase would be, give me one no thank you bite of tomatoes. Whereas a positive phrase would just say this, tomatoes are a new food for you. They're red and juicy, and they have a small sweet taste. By keeping our language neutral, we can let the child make their own decisions on what they think of the food. So start by making one positive food phrasing swap and bring awareness to how you're talking about food with the child. Remember, a small change can go a long way. So picky eating and food refusal are normal responses to new flavors, textures, and appearances in food, especially for toddlers. And picky eating really tends to peak anywhere from age 2 to 6. So it's normal for a child to be fearful or cautious of trying new foods, and this fear doesn't necessarily reflect picky eating. Remember, children prefer those familiar things, right? I'm sure you've seen that in your own routine, and this includes foods as well. So increased exposure to many types, textures, tastes, and smells can help mitigate this fear of foods through familiarization. And we know that infants are naturally more receptive to sweet foods over bitter foods, which unfortunately encompasses many of the vegetables. But the early and frequent introduction of a variety of foods and vegetables with various textures will increase acceptance over time. Even the way that we cook a food, if raw broccoli is too bitter, if we cook it or steam it, it can make it a little more acceptable. The child might be more willing to try it. So often the caregivers are concerned that the child isn't eating enough. However, pressure feeding in this situation typically only makes it worse. Instead, follow some of these tips to build trust with the child around food. So making food fun has been shown to increase the acceptance and trying new foods. So have fun with food, play with it, get them out with you cooking, get them in the garden, read books about food, any way to make it fun and familiar and exciting. Something that may also help instead of using food as a reward is to try a fruit and vegetable tracker. To make a weekly chart with some different fruits and vegetables that you want to try, you want the child to try, and ask them if they want to try that food. Remember, they don't have to try it. So if they try it, they can place a sticker, and that can either be a happy face, they liked it, a sad face, didn't really like it, or that neutral face, which is like, didn't love it, didn't hate it, and try to get them to taste these foods throughout the week and see if they have different thoughts about the food. Have them be an expert taste tester. Have them describe it. What's it smell like? What's the texture? How does it taste? What does it look like? Does the food make a funny sound when you eat it or when you squish it? So really get them curious about the foods that they're eating and make it fun. So don't stress if some of these tips are new or have revealed some opportunities for improvement in your feeding routine. You can always start to build trust with the child by sticking to the division of responsible feeding and remembering that you serve the healthful foods you want the child to eat, and the child decides whether to eat or not and how much to eat. And sticking with a routine, so stick to 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day. This will vary a lot depending on the age, the growth rate, and the activity level of the child. And sit at the table. Make a routine of having family meals when possible and no screens. Really focus on the task at hand, which is eating those nutritious foods for optimal health and growth. And lastly, model good eating behavior. Children whose caregivers model eating fruits and vegetables tend to consume more of those foods. Don't force it. These are lifestyle changes to stick with for the long run. You might not see positive changes overnight, but if you stick with it, you'll start to see a more positive relationship with your child around feeding. So this week's resources include a flyer about picky eating, positive food talk, and then a challenge around implementing positive food talk with the child. Thanks for watching.